All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are diving deep into a huge clash that's happening right now on America's highways. On one side, you've got independent truck drivers just trying to make a living. On the other, you have environmental regulations aiming to protect our air. And right in the middle, a massive debate over emission standards that's shaking up the entire supply chain. We have to start right here with this quote, because this really tells the whole story. This isn't just about abstract policies, it's about real people. Imagine getting a repair bill for $21,000 on a truck that's only worth $30,000. I mean, what do you even do? This one sentence just perfectly captures the financial vice that so many truckers are caught in. Okay, so to really get our heads around this, here's our game plan. We'll start with that crippling repair bill. Then we'll look at the EPA regulations causing all the drama. We'll break down the financial pain for truckers, and then flip the coin to see the environmental cost. We'll also zoom out to look at the giant maze of rules truckers face every day before we wrap it all up. So let's circle back to that staggering number, $21,000. It's more than just a figure on an invoice. It's a potential knockout punch for a small business. Let's unpack what's really going on here. You know that quote we started with? That's not some rare one-in-a-million horror story. It's actually a symptom of a much bigger problem. See, to meet clean air rules, modern trucks have these super complex systems, like diesel particulate filters, or DPFs. Think of them as incredibly sophisticated soot trucks for the exhaust. They work, but when they break, oh boy, the repairs are insanely expensive. For an owner-operator, one of these systems failing isn't just a bad day, it could literally be the end of their business. So how in the world did we get to a place where a single truck part could bankrupt someone? Well, it all comes down to federal policy. Let's dig into the specific regulations at the heart of this firestorm. It all started with this, the endangerment finding back in 2009. This was a landmark moment. The EPA officially said, hey, the greenhouse gases coming out of our vehicles are a real threat to public health. This was a huge deal because it essentially gave the EPA the legal firepower it needed to create and enforce all these emission standards we're talking about today. So after that finding, a whole new set of super strict emission standards were rolled out. But the big debate that we're looking at was kicked off by a proposal to basically hit the undo button on all of that. This wasn't just a small tweak, it was a plan to completely roll back those regulations. And the main argument for doing it was all about money. And here is the headline number that was used to sell that rollback. The EPA at the time estimated that getting rid of these standards would save Americans, get this, $54 billion. Every single year. I mean, that's a number that's impossible to ignore, right? It paints a picture of regulations that are just a massive drag on the entire economy. So how does a giant $54 billion number in Washington, D.C. actually connect to a driver on the road in, say, Ohio? Well, it comes down to the daily nightmare of what they call costly and repeated breakdowns. Okay, so here is the absolute core of the argument from the truckers' side. They say the technology needed to meet these new rules just isn't reliable. It breaks down all the time. That means more time in the shop, less time on the road earning a paycheck. And here's the crazy irony. Regulations designed to get cleaner trucks on the road are financially pushing drivers to hold on to their older, less efficient, higher polluting trucks for as long as they possibly can. Why? Because they're just cheaper and easier to fix. And check this out. A 2022 survey found that the average truck owned by an owner-operator had 1.2 million miles on it. That is just staggering. It's more than double the average from back in 2001. This isn't just a fun fact, it's solid proof that the fleet is getting older, as drivers try to avoid the cost and the headaches of these newer trucks. That's enough miles to drive to the moon and back twice. And even keeping those old workhorses running is bleeding them dry. That same small business owner from the first slide, they told the EPA they'd spent nearly $80,000 in just 3 years on their 4 trucks just to keep them safe and legal. It's a relentless, never-ending river of cash flowing out the door just to stay afloat. Todd Spencer, who's the president of the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, he just nails the sentiment here. For drivers, this isn't about being against clean air. Of course not. It's about being forced to buy equipment that they feel is faulty, that puts them on the sidelines, and that puts their whole livelihood at risk. All they're asking for, as he puts it, is a fair deal. And this brings me to a question for all of you watching, especially those of you on the front lines. If you're a driver, if you run a carrier, is this your reality? Have these insane repair costs and reliability problems hit your bottom line? Please share your story down in the comments. Your voice is so important in this conversation. So, The financial pain for truckers is real. It's obvious. It's well documented. But, there's always another side to the story. Rolling back these rules might save some people money, sure. But it comes with a completely different kind of price tag, one that isn't measured in dollars, but in our health and our environment. So now, let's look at the counterargument, because environmental and public health groups see this whole thing through a completely different lens. For them, weakening these standards isn't relief, it's a disaster. They call it a decisive blow to the progress we've made on climate and public health. Wow, this slide just lays the conflict out in the starkest terms possible. On the one hand, the EPA's estimate, $54 billion in annual savings. But on the other hand, the Environmental Defense Fund projects that the same move would ultimately cost consumers over $2 trillion. That massive gap comes from factoring in things like higher healthcare costs from pollution and the long-term damage from climate change. It's two completely different ways of looking at value. And the cost they're talking about isn't just theoretical, it's very real. Environmental groups predict a rollback would lead to some devastating consequences. We're talking more than 10 billion extra tons of climate pollution. More of that nasty microscopic soot that gets deep into your lungs. More nitrogen oxides, the stuff that causes smog. And what's the human cost of all that? A rise in premature deaths and a worsening of diseases like asthma, heart, and lung disease. And this quote from the Sierra Club really drives home the fact that, for them, the stakes are so much higher than just this one rule. They're afraid that undoing the original endangerment finding would cripple the EPA's ability to protect us from pollution for decades to come. Then that leads us to the central question, and we genuinely want to know what you think. What's the right balance here? How do we protect the economic survival of the people who move everything we buy, while also protecting the health of our communities and the planet? There are no easy answers, so please let us know what you think in the comments. Now, it's really important to zoom out for a second and realize that this whole intense fight over emissions, it's just one piece of a much, much larger puzzle. For truckers, every single day is a battle to navigate a whole mountain of regulations. Staying compliant isn't just some yearly paperwork. It is a massive, nonstop, daily challenge that touches every single part of the business. And managing this complicated world is a huge weight on carriers. That's why many of them rely on partners, companies called consortium third-party administrators, to handle these crucial pieces, so they can just focus on driving. Just look at this list. It is overwhelming. On top of the EPA standards we've been talking about, you've got strict hours of service rules for driver fatigue, constant vehicle maintenance logs, cargo securement rules, complicated tax filings, and a really big one, mandatory DOT and FMCSA drug and alcohol screening. Each one of these is non-negotiable. And that last one, the drug and alcohol compliance, is a whole universe in itself, with random testing pools and intense record keeping. It's absolutely critical for safety, and honestly, it's precisely the kind of complex task that a service like LabWorks USA handles, taking that huge burden off a company's shoulders so their trucks can keep rolling safely and legally. So, after looking at the personal stories, the policy debate, the environmental stakes, and the giant regulatory maze, where does all of this leave us? It leaves us on a road with a very big, very unresolved question mark at the end. When you boil it all down, this is the fundamental conflict. And it's so important to recognize that both sides have legitimate, powerful arguments. You've got the immediate, real-world, economic survival of the American trucker, the backbone of our economy, and you have the long-term health of our planet and every single person living on it. And maybe that's the real question we should be asking. Does it have to be a choice between one or the other? Or, as technology evolves, can we innovate our way out of this conflict? Can we actually create a future where clean air and a thriving, profitable trucking industry aren't fighting each other, but are actually part of the same solution? We really hope this explainer helped shed some light on this incredibly complicated issue. If you were inspired by this video, please do us a huge favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, LabWorks USA. And of course, feel free to share this video as well. Thank you so much for watching.